You know, tonight, most Americans are sheltering in place at home, many entering their third week under these kind of limits. And beyond all the urgent health risks we have been covering, there's also the impact of isolation and loneliness over the long term. It is hard to be cut off from other people. Listen, for example, to some people who felt lonely as they describe what they're going through.
In that moment, I've never felt so isolated.
Definitely felt the impact of not having any physical face-to-face contact with people, because you just feel alone and like there's nobody around to help.
I think that the thing about being lonely is that it makes it feel like no one really knows you, and that, you know, if you disappear, you just slip away, and there'll be no real record of who you were.
Just disappeared. Those are just a few voicemails that are left on England's loneliness hotline. They created it for people who felt isolated long before this pandemic. And here in the U.S., it's an ongoing challenge. You know, almost half of Americans say they feel alone, some or all of the time, according to a survey that came out recently. The fact is, it's hard to be alone in normal times, let alone to be basically pushed into this social isolation in this pandemic. Experts have found humans need other humans. We need contact and socializing for our own health. And some of the research on this comes from studying prisons and solitary confinement. No one is suggesting that just quarantining on your couch is like a prison. But the studies are important. It shows that being cut off from people or held in solitary confinement increases anxiety, depression, anger, paranoia, can even stoke suicidal thoughts in people that otherwise may not have had them. So what knowledge and experience can people draw on to get through these hard times against the backdrop of a pandemic and people getting sick and dying around us? Well, right now, we've convened a special discussion to go a little deeper on this. We're joined by attorney Jarrett Adams. He served over 9 years in prison on a wrongful conviction that was overturned. He went on to law school and a prestigious clerkship on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Adams spent about 2 of those years in solitary confinement, an experience that informs his perspective, I want to mention, on these issues and his current civil rights work. He's joined us on air before. We also have with us developmental psychologist Susan Pinker, who has over 25 years of experience in clinical practice. She's the author of The Village Effect, about how face-to-face contact shapes our health. Important stuff and tough topics like so much these days. My special thanks to Susan and Jarrett for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello,
Jarrett, let me start with your more extreme experience that is not what everyone's going through now, but you're such an extraordinary story. What did you struggle with in isolation and solitary confinement, and what insights, if any, do you draw from it?
Well, thank you, Ari, again for having me on. But it's like you opened up the segment and said, you know, it pales in comparison to people who are incarcerated and don't have anyone around them. But I will say this, communication is what got me through that. I had an auntie who would send me Bible verses, you know, different ways to motivate me. And she told me one thing that stuck with me. And she said, look, in a difficult time like this, you have to tell yourself that each day you have the opportunity to get out the next. And it was a healthy way for me to cope with it. And I also did this as well. I took the opportunity with the time that I was there to invest in myself, to go back and reevaluate myself, reevaluate goals, and to psychologically remove myself from the isolation, although I was physically isolated.
Wow. I mean, you put that very clearly. Susan, is that possible? How do we do that? And what does your work and research suggest about the keys?
Well, that's an extreme situation that Jarrett went through. And, you know, that isolating people has historically been used to punish them throughout history because it is the most serious and painful kind of torture you can inflict on somebody, pretty much. And, you know, what we're experiencing now is not at all like that. We are withdrawn from our social contacts. And let me be clear, even though the effects of that feel painful, They feel physically painful. You know, I'd like to emphasize that social distancing is an absolute necessary step right now.
Sure.
And even if loneliness has damaging effects, and we know it does, it reduces our lifespan, it reduces our immunity to viruses, paradoxically. As you pointed out, it makes us angry, can make us depressed. But of course, in our current situation, we have to maintain social distance right now, keeping in mind that being alone is not the same thing as being lonely, as Jared just referred to. Being lonely is a more existential angst, feeling you don't belong anywhere, feeling that nobody cares about you. And it's very important to distinguish those two.
What about, Susan, first, control? Again, you've both emphasized, as we did in our setup, we're not equating the two. But when you don't have control, when people do feel that, for example, on top of government rules that they stay home right now, many people have lost jobs or have loved ones who lost jobs. There is this stress that I don't think we're fully capturing, maybe because it's hard to do. I certainly don't think we're always capturing it in the national discourse, such as it is, that people feel this tremendous loss of control of daily life. What about that?
Well, that uncertainty really adds to the general feeling of angst that's pervading society right now. And I think the important aspect of control that you mentioned is to exert some control of our social life as much as we have it right now. So, for example, find new forms of intimacy. Even though we can't get together face to face with our loved ones if they don't live with us, there are ways that we can reach out to them. And there are ways that we can even increase our kind of weaker bonds, because research says it's not just the people that we hold so close and so dear to us that matter, but the people we meet as we move throughout our day. And that's much more difficult if you're confined indoors, to kind of keep up that kind of collegial contact. You know, make sure that you say hi to the dog walker or the neighbor or your colleagues or the barista that you used to get your coffee from. So that's a lot trickier, I would say.
Yeah, understood. Jared, your views on that, and I also wanted to get your views on the actual other issue here, the way that all of this plays out for at-risk populations and the currently incarcerated.
Yeah, I'll say this. Again, taking this time and using it for the best of us as humans is an important thing that we need to do. Everyone, almost every American, sets a New Year's resolution. So even though it's very early in this new year, this is an opportunity to go back, look at that resolution, and to see, you know, what was working out. Maybe you can go back to the drawing board and revisit it. I'll say this, Ari, we don't know the entire toll that this is going to take on us, because we're in the eye of the storm right now. It's not over with right now. But I do know this. Humans are amazing in the resolve that we have. We'll get through this. We've seen difficult times, and I believe that we will get through this. And another way for us to get through it is to think about if we didn't have social media. Think about if we didn't have our cell phones. Think about how isolated we would truly be then. And I also want to be mindful of the fact that right now I'm working on a petition for a guy that I'm representing who's currently incarcerated in the United States Penitentiary in Pollock. Louisiana has been hard hit by this virus, and he used the analogy to me that he feels like he's on a train track and he can't get off, and he's heard of the devastation of this train in other towns, and it's surely headed his way. So I want to say, as humans, this is our opportunity right now to reach out, to hug each other from that social distance by just sending that email, sending that text, and just caring right now. Look, we can point fingers later. But right now, we need to be concerned about each other's mental health and health after this as well.
Appreciate all that. Makes a lot of sense. Jared Adams, having lived through so much and overcome so much, I'm glad to reconnect with you, like so many are doing, at a distance right now. And Susan Pinker, with all your work on this, really appreciate your insights as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.